Okay, so in my last video, we talked a little bit about how many miles I've put on pre-72 cars, in the last 20 years. A lot of those miles I was riding until I was 15, and then I started driving. But majority of the miles the last 17 years, I've done the driving. So what I'm going to talk about now is something I briefly mentioned in the last video about, sometimes it is the Chinese parts and it's their fault. And here's what we're going to talk about now. Let me turn the camera around. So on my Vista Cruiser here, at one time last week, I had a leaking water pump, a bad alternator that had 500 miles on it, a leaking radiator that had probably less than 5,000 miles on it, all at the same time. What do you do in a situation like that? Well, I just started replacing parts. I did determine the water pump, it was an aluminum water pump, it was leaking. The radiator was, I took the radiator to Gerald's, it was to the radiator shop, it was leaking. In so many places, he said it wasn't worth fixing. The alternator, you can see all this crap slung all over the place. It's slinging some type of grease. Just craziness. I mean, this is getting out of hand. So what I did is, what I should have done to start with, I bought a Griffin radiator from Jags. You can get these things cheaper through a big vendor, even though Griffin is local to me, which is crazy. And then I've got this PowerMaster alternator, which is USA made, supposedly. They warranted the other one and given me, I just paid a few dollars more and got that one. And I've been getting those locally also. But sometimes it doesn't matter how good you try to prevent stuff like this from happening. The main thing, you don't want it to happen on the side of the road. Luckily, I've caught this before I decided to drive this car way off, because this could have been a huge disaster if I had all those parts go bad at one time. So, yeah, that's a problem. I went and got a CarQuest iron water pump, a new one. Hopefully, I haven't had any trouble out of these. Hopefully, this won't be a first that I'll have trouble out of. I've heard auto shops having all kinds of problems out of every kind of part you can possibly imagine, whether it be a sensor or whether it be a pump or a master cylinder or anything. I try to eliminate problems like that. I highly recommend the Willwood parts just because they don't give a lot of problems. But what can you do? You can do every precaution. You can drive your car thousands and thousands of miles like you're supposed to do, and you still end up with issues. This car I have fought these leaks since I got it back from the upholstery shop and couldn't figure out where they were coming from. Finally, it just got worse and worse, and I was able to isolate the problems. So just keep that in mind out there. Again, not driving your car will exacerbate these problems. I've dealt with that with this car. It's the car that gets drove the least. And because of that, I deal with, like I said in the last video, fuel literally evaporating from the fuel tank. Especially if it's low. Makes it even worse. The, transmission fluid leaking. I finally put a new transmission pan on this thing and a rubber gasket, and looks to have stopped the leak. It still looks like it's got a drop or two of something under there. But, you just chase this stuff. Another thing about transmissions, if you don't drive them, they'll leak out the dipstick tube. The pan will fill up too high and they'll leak out the dipstick tube. That's another reason you got to keep these cars driven. This car here does not get driven enough, but I've got all these other ones. So the more cars you have, the more problems like that exacerbate themselves. Again, luckily, being in the situation that I am and doing auto restoration for a living, you know, I just come get in my car, drive it to lunch, drive another to supper, you know, whatever. So it keeps things, everything circulated. You know, of course I enjoy driving them, but it eliminates and it cuts down on a lot of problems. Stuff like this is just stuff, you know, this radiator had been in the car for 4 years. Not this one, but the other one. But to go bad, uncalled for. Water pump, you know, since this engine was put in here, to go bad, uncalled for. 500 miles on a tough stuff alternator. Don't buy any tough stuff alternators. They're junk. They go bad. Just don't waste your time. What can I say? You know, you constantly battle, like even these valve covers. These were Chinese valve covers. Got them on here and they leaked. I fought these things leaking for a few years. Finally discovered that there was a casting flaw on the sealing surface that the oil was slipping by, and got that sealed up, and it really helped the problem. But they were still leaking, and then when I took it to have the vintage air hooked up, Tommy put studs and nuts, and that seems to have stopped the leaks. Imagine the issues if you don't drive these cars. You will have leaks like you will not believe, because the seals will just dry out. And I want to say one more thing about ethanol fuel. Again, ethanol fuel, it is a proven fact that it dries out rubber more than regular 100% gas. The thing about it is now they have actually changed these compounds, a lot of this gasoline line, where it holds up a lot better than it used to. I haven't seen one of my gasoline lines. This has been on this car since this engine was put in here, 4 years. It's still soft. All that goes through this thing is ethanol fuel. This carb's been on here since 2015. Haven't had any trouble out of it. It's a Quadrajet ethanol fuel. This carb was built by National Carburetor. All American is another good one. Just be careful about your Quadrajets, and especially Quadrajets, they tend to be more of the issue on stuff like that. Petronics ignition, Petronics 3s, I've got them in everything. So far I hadn't had any trouble. Of course, MSD stuff, I haven't had any trouble. So vintage air so far has been good. That's just a few of the things that I run. I started doing the Willwood brakes. So I'm just telling you what I know. Hopefully this will save you some trouble. Don't cheap out on one of the Champion radiators unless you just got a car you're buying and gonna sell, or you know, just gonna be a local driver. Go ahead and spend the money, get you a Griffin. These Griffins are a lot cheaper than they used to be. These are mass produced now for 68 to 77, I believe they called this. So this is the same radiator here that's in that car over there. At the time that I won that radiator, that was like a $700 radiator. This now sells at Jegs for like around 400 bucks. So anyway, with that being said, restoration inquiry information will be in the video description if you need to get a hold of me for that reason. A lot of y'all have reached out so far. Appreciate that. Appreciate all the views. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do so. We'll see you next time.